Hello, and welcome to Transformed. I'm your host, Josh McMullen, where we will discuss and explore topics, ideas on how to transform our current lives and be the person we need to be and the person that God created us to be. Today, I want to talk about growing up. Growing up can be so hard. There's so many, so much stuff that kind of gets lost in translation from the time we're kids to the time we're adults. And a lot of that stuff that gets lost can be extremely, extremely important to our adult lives. And I just feel like we should talk a little bit about, what gets lost in that childhood, right? And I feel like there's a lot of fun facts in here in this episode that I've gotten through podcasts and through books and through a lot of other areas that I just want to bring up, just kind of paint a picture of, because it wasn't until you kind of put all these facts together that it kind of does paint this picture that something does get lost from the time we're kids to adults. So one of the first facts that I read was a baby or toddler smiles on average of 400 times a day. An adult smiles on average of 40 times a day. A baby is born, and that's all babies, right? All humans are born with two natural fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. And those are called innate fears. And all other fears that we have are learned fears. So I've got a fear of heights. So that is learned, right? Wasn't a born fear. Then there's 98% of 4 and 5-year-olds are creative geniuses. And that falls to 30% by the age 10, 12% by the age 15, and then only 2% stay creative geniuses. So by the time that we're adults, so if you put all those together, by the time we're adults, we're less creative, we're more fearful, and we smile about 10 times less than we did as kids. So we're less joyful, really. The way I kind of paint all those together, I guess, would be like the monsters under the bed as kids become the monsters in our heads as adults. So why, right? Why and what happens to us that is so profound that almost changes us completely as a person throughout those formative years? And I would like to think we could have a creative discussion on it, but based on the stats, maybe not as creative as we could have had. But I think the answer lies really within the pain, the trauma, the heartbreak, the embarrassment, the pursuit of our desires, maybe the crushing of our desires and our goals and us not meeting them early on. I think some of our hurts and our struggles, our need to fit in, to become part of the status quo, the way we just conform, right? We don't want to stand out. We want to wear what everyone wants to wear. We desire to be accepted. We want to sit with the popular kids in the table at lunch. We don't want to be made fun of. So we change ourselves. We kind of mold ourselves to kind of fit with this group. And I think we do that pretty early, right? Like a lot of these stats start dropping off when we're kindergarten and first grade. And that's really when school hits and we start getting lumped in with all these kids and we start getting moved through this process and graded on our, a certain set of talents and abilities. And a lot of those other areas of genius that we have kind of maybe get lumped in with everybody else, right? And we kind of try to get lumped in with everybody else. So it's kind of like not to go too much against the school system, right? But, we kind of all get graded the same way. And we kind of get lumped in these same categories, but then at the same time, we want to kind of get lumped in with these same categories and not stick out because we want to be with the quote popular kids or the popular group, and we don't want to be kind of on the outside. Another way to kind of look at this is in the book "It Takes What It Takes" by Trevor Moawad. He works with like NFL players and major college football programs and other professional sports leagues and professionals, and he really helps players with like their performance, but also like their mental performance. So in the book, he brings up something very interesting, and it's a popular sports adage that says like, champions are made, not born. And he kind of mentioned through his experience of dealing with all of these athletes that he really believes the inverse is true, that champions are born and they're somewhere throughout their life, they're unmade. And I really don't think he's wrong, right? I think every single one of us is God's like perfect creation, and that we're born geniuses, and we're born with these amazing, unique talents. And then somewhere in the coming of age, right, we lose sight of our talents and our gifts and our abilities and how God made us and what God made us for. And I think we stop searching and trying, and we get into our own little bubble in our fields, and we get into our own head, and we stop wanting to be that champion, and we stop pursuing how God created us. So I think that's also because we tell ourselves a lot of lies, right? Like, we believe a lot of lies about ourselves. And I've mentioned this, I think, before, and I've told my youth group this as well, that, a lot of the time I kind of feel unqualified. I really feel unqualified to even be on the podcast. I feel unqualified to be a youth leader. I feel unqualified to have, a lot of the stuff that I have. But, it's the lies, that we believe, and the lies that we tell ourselves. And the truth is that, we're actually perfectly created by God. God loves us, and He created us uniquely and specifically. And He created us over, He loves variety, right? He created over 1 million different beetles, right? That's variety. And every single one of us is completely unique. Whether, look at their fingerprints, right? They don't match up. Not even twins, they don't match up. Yet, He created us to be unique, and we lose sight of that, right? We go to school, we get in the group of people, and we just want to form and transform ourselves into, the wrong image, right? Not the image of God, and not pursuing what God created us to be, but yet kind of what the system wants, what the school wants, and we try to get that, SAT and have that form of intelligence, but in all reality, we might have a different form of intelligence. And that's something else I learned, is that there's actually 9 forms of intelligence out there that we can be, geniuses on, whether you're nature smart or sound smart, like musical, right? Maybe you're more like mathematical and number smart. There's existential smart, which are just kind of like life smart. There's people smart, which is interpersonal. There's body smart. There's then like a linguistic, where you're like a word smart. And then there's self smart. And then there's a picture smart. There's so many different forms of intelligence, and we really don't get graded in all of them, or at least promoted in all of them. And I think this reinforces a few things. With one, I think we're created unique. And we're different from one another, just like a fingerprint. And we all have different forms of talents and gifts that God's given us. And we have different likes and dislikes, and we're all created differently. And all of us have different intelligence levels, right? So we might have a different form of each of those intelligence. Maybe, like for me, I'm not musically smart at all. There might be some listeners out there who are extremely musical smart, right? My son, he loves tractors and tools and construction equipment. And I'm learning from him every single day of what, farming and all that fun stuff. That's not my intelligence whatsoever. Shiloh is a really big book reader, right? She can read, I swear, 200 pages in a night, and I'm lucky if I can get 20. Like, we're just completely different levels of intelligence in those areas. And I feel like I've gotten, especially with a lot of the weight loss, I feel like I've gotten kind of body smart on like how the body works. I've learned a lot about recovery with, tearing my pectoral muscle. We just all learn and have different abilities. And God created us to have those different abilities, right? And I think, the Bible supports that, right? If you look in Scripture, David actually talks about his unique role, right? And his existence that God, gave to him. And that's in Psalms 139. He goes, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that I'm full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." So God crafted each of us with a certain set of talents and skills, right? God is infinite, and He knows everything about us, our feelings, our likes, our dislikes, our pet peeves, our little ticks, because we were woven together, and He took the time to craft and form each and every one of us. The problem that we have in the world is we tend to hide our talents, right? We tend to kind of really lose sight of that we are perfectly created by God. And I think we're going to be crafted and created, right? We're going to be shaped. The choice is whether we're going to be shaped by the world and our peers, or if we're going to be shaped by how God wants us to be shaped. And I think that this is something we all need to be aware of, right? Whether we have kids, whether we have coworkers, family members, friends, peers, whoever, right? We need to make sure that we're uplifting to them, and we need to make sure that they understand that they're a masterpiece by God and seeing them as the person that they could be. And I think that's one of my biggest things as being a dad, is that I'm going to try to make sure that Rhett realizes his full potential and see him not as the other person who's going to make mistakes, right? Even when he grows up to be a young kid and a teenager, we've all been teenagers, or we're all going to be teenagers, and they make mistakes as teenagers. And I'm not going to view him as the person who makes mistakes. You got to view him as the person who God created him to be. And really, Shiloh did that for me. She saw me as the person, not as the unhealthy person who was ruled by his emotions, but she saw me as the person who could be the man after God, right? Who could have control over his habits and emotions and be the leader of the family. She encouraged and supported me throughout that whole process, right? And Jesus did that as well, right? He didn't see Peter as the person who constantly put his foot in his mouth and made mistakes, right? He saw him as the rock, right? And even gave him that proclamation, right? Because Peter, in I think Greek or Hebrew, some other smarter people can remember that, but actually means rock. Right, and so Jesus giving him hey, no, you're going to be the rock I'm going to build that church on, gave him that I'm going to see you, I'm seeing you as how God created you to be, and that's going to be the rock that I'm going to build my church on, right? So we need to do that as Christians, we need to do that as human beings, is not to put other people down or to, you can't do this, right? No, we need to be very uplifting and encouraging. And if if we're going to be kind of numbering on how we need to do this, right? The first thing we need to do is we need to overcome the negativity in the world by not listening to how the world defines us, right? So I said earlier, either we're going to be shaped by the world or we're going to be shaped by God. So we can't be listening to how the world's going to shape us, because they're going to probably shape us wrong. Others are going to shape us wrong. We need to listen to how God defines us. We need to listen to how He shaped us. And we're not going to be able to listen to how God defines us if we're just sitting around watching Netflix. I think we need to get out and explore God's creation. I think we need to take the strengths that He's given us, and I think we need to use them to serve God, right? I think we need to get out into God's world and use our talents and gifts to serve other people and uplift other people. There are a lot of us who are great at taking our gifts and helping the church, but I think we also can take helping other people. But I think we need to take it a step further and help strangers, right? Help other people throughout our life. I know I can do that as well. It's something I'm looking to do, is maybe take, instead of helping just the youth group of the church, but help other people who I'm maybe not have connected with for a long time, or could be complete strangers. So I feel like that's one of my calling now, is to help people see that God can transform their lives. It's really the nature of this whole podcast. I guess a second point to how we can be shaped by how God sees us, but also overcome that I guess the lost in translation, the things that get lost from the childhood, is I think we need to be guarding our minds, and I think we need to be renewing our minds constantly. I think we need to be in prayer. I think we need to be reading the Bible. I think we need to be asking God to direct our lives and direct our minds and help us focus on where we need to focus, and not on the negativity and the emotions and the negative self-talk and the defeating talk and the defeating ideas that, wherever they come from, right? We need to be focused on God and have that God-focused mindset instead of a self-focused mindset or others-focused mindset. And I think we need to add God to everything in our lives, right? I think whether it's working out, hobbies, if you try to add God into every activity that you do, God's going to bless those activities. And I think it's also going to put in perspective of what activities that we want to do. So to guard our minds, we also need to wear the helmet of salvation. It will protect us from our doubt, our fear, and our worry, temptations, because the mind is where the battlefield begins, right? Salvation is a gift from God. And we need to remember that salvation. We need to remember that salvation, and we need to call on the powerful name of God when we're in trouble, and when we feel defeated, and when we feel down, and when we've maybe given into that negative self-talk, right? We need to pray to God and ask Him, to help us and to pull us up, guard our minds, and to help us to capture every single thought and bring it into obedience.